Hi guys, so this is just a recap on the end of To Kill a Mockingbird. So if you did not log in to the Zoom today, I'm just going to fill you in right here. So that we're going to go over that last symbolic piece that nobody kind of was able to connect in class right now. So when they're on their way, when Scout and Jem are on their way to the Halloween pageant, Scout trips on the roots of the tree. All right, so that is to kind of remind us of Boo Radley, right? We kind of almost forgot about him. He kind of fell to the back of our minds when we've been going through the trial. All right, so this is supposed to kind of like slam into our memory, Boo Radley. Okay, and they kind of joke about him as well. Remember when, we were scared of him, we were scared of Haynes, like all those things. Okay, so the tree, though, is symbolic of their connection to Boo. So if you think about it, they had left those presents. He had left those presents for the kids in the knothole. Okay, and that was their connection when it was cemented up. They felt upset. They felt bad because their connection was kind of like cut off. Now the roots are going to be, this connection to Boo Radley as well. Okay, so they go to the Halloween pageant, and here it's like, remember we talked about there's kind of comic relief before every serious chapter. So this is kind of like our comic relief, right? So we get to the Halloween pageant, she falls asleep backstage and then, misses her time to come on stage, and then she runs out during the finale and she kind of like ruins the whole pageant, right? And she feels really bad about herself, and Judge Taylor thought it was so funny he had to leave the auditorium and he was like cracking up outside. So she feels really bad about herself. She doesn't want to take her costume off when they're leaving the pageant. So they go to leave, Jem and Scout do, and Scout realizes she forgot her shoes. So they go to turn back, and then all the lights shut off. So Jem says, okay, forget about it. We'll just get them tomorrow. So they're walking home, and here you're supposed to clue in. It's supposed to remind us of earlier when Bob Ewell was trailing behind Helen Robinson, because he trails the kids the same way he trailed her. They start walking, he's walking, and then they stop and he stops. So same thing with Helen, right? She was walking, he was walking, and then they stop. And then she starts walking, and he's walking, she stops, so he stops. So this is happening on their way home, but they didn't know that happened to Helen, right? So, or exactly, how. So this is happening, and Scout thinks it's just Cecil Jacobs, so she yells back, you're a big fat hen. And Jem is like, hello, right? So they're walking again, and then all of a sudden somebody's charging after them. Okay, so this was Bob. Now there's a lot of confusion over who actually killed Bob Ewell. It was not Jem. It was not him falling on his knife. It was Boo Radley, right? So Boo Radley saved the kids by killing Bob. Okay, we know it wasn't Jem because if you notice, he was flung off and broke his arm pretty much right in the beginning of the scuffle, right? So him breaking his arm, though, that's the key piece that kind of puts the book all together. Because if you remember, back on page 1, the book starts, when he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. When it healed and Jem's fears of never being able to play football were assuaged, he was seldom self-conscious about his injury. His left arm was somewhat shorter than his right. When he stood or walked, the back of his hand was at right angles to his body, his thumb parallel to his thigh. He couldn't have cared less, so long as he could pass and punt. When enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them, we sometimes discussed the events leading to his accident. I maintain that the Ewells started it all. But Jem, who was 4 years my senior, said it started long before that. He said it began the summer Dill came to us, when Dill first gave us the idea of making Boo Radley come out. All right, so now he broke his arm. So that's why the book is going to end here. Okay, that's why this is the ending. Because they were sitting there talking. Remember when he broke your arm? What started that? She says it's the Ewells. He says, no, it's when Dill came to us. So that's why pretty much chapter 1, chapter 2, we're getting introduced to all the characters. We get introduced to Dill. And they're trying to make Boo Radley come out. And then in the end, he breaks his arm. So that is what pulls the whole story together. We come full circle. So the whole thing was a flashback. So the whole thing was a flashback, and there's also a symbolic piece there with Jem's arm. Who else had an issue with their arm in the story? Tom Robinson, right? So if you remember, Tom Robinson was the mockingbird, right? It's a sin to kill mockingbird. We kind of went over that. Like, they killed his innocence. Jem also lost his innocence at the trial that day, though. If you remember, it's like he was being stabbed repetitively in the back every time they said guilty. So that day killed his innocence, and then the fact that he now has an issue with one of his arms shows that he's going to carry that with him for the rest of his life. How he felt and how he was affected is going to stick with him. What happened in that trial stays with him for his whole life. Okay? So it's almost like he's a reflection of Tom, and it's like he's a mockingbird too. The other thing is, like, when they were saying guilty, it's like he's being stabbed in the back. Tom died by being shot, 17 times in his back. Okay? So we also get one more reference to Killing a Mockingbird here, because after this whole scuffle ends and they're back at the Finch's house, and Scout realizes that it's Boo Radley who kind of carried Jem into the house and saved them, Atticus thinks that Jem did it. Jem killed Bob. And so he says, we need to talk about this. This needs to be out in the open. I'm not going to cover it up. And Hecate says, no, by covering this up, I'm not protecting Jem. Jem's not who I'm concerned about. He's concerned about Boo Radley. Because he says, if I, bring all this attention to Boo, call attention to him and kind of ruin his life by making everybody, is he going to end up in court? Is he going to end up, having reporters all over? What's going to happen, right? It's going to be a big story. Everybody's going to want to talk to him. It's going to ruin his life. Because he doesn't want to leave the house, right? He's this with his shy ways, right? And Scout says, yeah, if you drag him out, and it would be like shooting a mockingbird. Okay? So we also get the sense that Boo was a mockingbird too, right? He didn't do anything wrong. He just, lived his life, and he wanted to just stay in his house, and then the whole town is having, all these rumors about him saying he does all these awful things, when really, he doesn't hurt anybody. Okay? The last thing that really kind of gives us a close with really hammers the theme home of, hammers the empathy theme home, is the last scene where Scout is walking home with Boo. So Scout is, Boo says, can you take me home? And she says, sure, but she has him lead, right? So they're walking back to Boo Radley's house, and Scout stands on the porch, and she notices that she has never seen the neighborhood from that angle before. And so she sits there on the porch, and she goes through the entire story from Boo's perspective. Okay? So she sits there and says, I turned to go home. Street lights winked down the street all the way to town. I had never seen our neighborhood from this angle. There were Miss Maudie's, Miss Stephanie's, there was our house. I could see the porch swing. Miss Rachel's house was beyond us, plainly visible. I could even see Mrs. Rose's. I looked behind me. To the left of the brown door was a long shuttered window. I walked to it, stood in front of it, and turned around. In daylight, I thought. Plainly visible. In daylight, I thought. You could see the post office corner. Daylight, in my mind, and this is where she's going through the whole story. The night faded. It was daytime and the neighborhood was busy. Miss Stephanie Crawford crossed the street to tell us the latest to Miss Rachel. Miss Maudie bent over her azaleas. It was summertime, and 2 children scampered down the sidewalk toward a man approaching in the distance. The man waved, and the children raced each other to him. So that was Scout and Jem racing to go see Atticus after work. Okay? It was summertime, and the children came closer. A boy trudged down the sidewalk, dragging a fishing pole behind him. A man stood waiting with his hands on his hips. Again, remember, Dill and Jem tried to put that little note to Boo Radley in his house with a fishing pole, and then Atticus got mad at them. Summertime, and his children played in front of the yard with their friend, Dill, enacting a strange little drama of their own invention. Remember, they made up that whole play about Boo Radley? It was fall, and his children fought on the sidewalk in front of Mrs. DeBose's. The boy helped his sister to his feet, and they made their way home. Remember, that was Jem wrecking all of the flowers. Fall, and his children trotted to and fro the corner, the day's woes and triumphs on their faces. They stopped at the oak tree, delighted, puzzled, apprehensive. So going to and from school, they see the gifts in the knot tree. Winter and his children shivered at the front gate, silhouetted against a blazing house. So Miss Maudie's house when it was on fire. Winter, and a man walked into the street, dropped his glasses, and shot a dog. All right, so again, a reference to Tim Johnson then. Summer, and he watched his children's hearts break. So that was the trial with Tom Robinson. Autumn again, and Boo's children needed him. Again, so that was after the Halloween pageant, and Bob is attacking them, and he is kind of thrust into this role as like the protector, and he thinks of them as like his children, right? Boo's children needed him. Atticus was right. One time he said you never really knew a man until you stood in his shoes and walked around in them. Just standing on the Radley porch was enough. All right, so again, that's like the piece of empathy where she's standing in his shoes and seeing everything from his perspective. Okay? All right, so that is the recap of the end of To Kill a Mockingbird. If you have any questions, please let me know. The final assignment is posted to Google Classroom, so that is either the one-pager, which you're going to set up around one of the themes that we talked about, or you are writing up an epilogue. So if you weren't satisfied with the ending, what do you think what do you think the characters would be doing now, right? You can place it any time. You can place it like 5 years forward or jump 10 years, 20 years. But keep in mind what's going on in U.S. history wherever you decide to place your story.